Hello and welcome to the first SvelteDublin meetup. So we're all in funny times at the moment. I hope everyone's staying home and staying safe. We're going to try and get this meetup going. It's going to be online, so it might be a little bit different than a normal one. Everything mightn't always be live because I tried to go live last night and it didn't really work. So I'm trying a new setup here. We might do it where some of the talks are pre-recorded. Maybe I can edit them together. It might make people a bit more comfortable as well to give talks. Some people don't like talking in front of a group or talking live, so this might help some people who are happy to talk at home, have a few little trial runs to come in and give a talk with us. So if you're interested, go to SvelteDublin with a dot between the L and the I and sign up there. Let us know what you think. You can follow us on Twitter at Dublin Svelte. So again, this is the first one. It's all hopefully going to be pretty relaxed. We're going to just give an introduction. So for those who don't know anything about Svelte, maybe they've heard about it, they've played with React, maybe you've played with Angular, Vue, maybe you've at most played with jQuery. That's nearly where I come from, and that's what we're going to explain here today, is really what it is, what it does, and why we might be interested in it. So there's going to be a few slides first, and then we're going to go into some code demos. So yeah, let me know what you think. Let's get into it. So it's a meetup. You've got to have a title card. We can jump by that. So I'm David Fitzgibbon. I run Lo-Fi Codes. We've had some talks on the Dublin CSS meetup, a few articles on CSS tricks, so I'm no expert, but I have a small little bit of experience, and hopefully this is of some use to you. So let's jump into it. So really why I started to like Svelte initially was it's around the whole reason I chose the Twitter handle Lo-Fi Codes. When I saw Angular and React coming along, I saw a lot of boilerplate and a lot of framework specific knowledge needed to get something done. Going from Angular to React had some of the same concepts in the actual writing of the code and how variables are passed and bindings and things like that. But to actually write it was very different between the two frameworks, so it became very difficult to learn one or the other. You nearly had to specialize in one and spend some time in it, and it wasn't very easy to pick up. Say when you compare it to jQuery, where you can essentially learn one trick, the dollar selector, and then you just throw functions on the end of it. Everyone gets that. That works pretty easily for everybody, and all that's involved in Angular and React, maybe less so Vue, seemed like too much, so I never really took it on. So I tried to keep myself to Lo-Fi Codes, where it would be jQuery, vanilla JavaScript, what can you do with CSS, if we learn more about SVG, if we learn more about Canvas, can we get interesting things going there that are working with what the browser wants to do, rather than trying to force the browser to do something it doesn't want to do. So that's why I chose Lo-Fi Codes. And then that leads into why I like Svelte. So, why Svelte? So it's the platform. React and Angular seem to be fighting against the platform. They're trying to create something the platform doesn't want to do. They want to create their own idea of how JavaScript should work. React going as far as JSX, nearly its own HTML. Maybe that belies how little I know about React. But they seem to be trying to create their own thing. Whereas, again, the jQuery example is that it was just wrappers around JavaScript. It didn't want to change how JavaScript worked. It just wanted to make it maybe a little bit easier for you to take advantage of what JavaScript itself wants to do. So using the platform, I think, is a good thing. Which brings us to Svelte, because it has a slightly... Rich Harris in his talks, who is the inventor of Svelte, describes it as being like a spiritual successor to jQuery in a way, because of that approach where it wants to use the platform to get you doing more. So Rich has better ways of saying it like this. So frameworks are not tools for organizing your code, they are tools for organizing your mind. Now this seems like a small difference, but it's very important. So React and Angular and their ilk are trying to create new ways of organizing your code so that it's easier and it's maybe easier to do more complicated things. I don't doubt that they do that. But the organization of it, from my mind anyway, is more complicated than the benefits are worth. So I find that Svelte is a little more straight-lined, and we're going to go into detail now in the next slide about why. But for your mind, Svelte is just clearer if you're used to JavaScript. And I think even if you're just coming in by default, there's so much less boilerplate with Svelte that you're going to have an easier time getting up to speed with Svelte than you are with React or Angular or something like that. So the main trick that Svelte has up its sleeve is that it's a compiler. So what that means is that with React or Angular, or even jQuery, you're putting the entire framework in a JavaScript file on the page, the whole thing, and then you're bringing your code along in the next file and running it using what has been instantiated in the first JavaScript file. Svelte being a compiler is different. You don't bring in the framework. You just write your script, run the compiler, and then it pulls the pieces of the framework that need to go with your script and creates a new single script and puts it on the page. There are going to be examples of this later, but it's really interesting when you think about it, because in the end, JavaScript just needs a file or several files will be downloaded, and then the JavaScript interpreter will take what it needs from that to run the code you want to run. But it will also keep in memory all the stuff you don't want to run, all the extra stuff in your framework that you haven't used. Whereas when you've got a compiled framework, the only code that the user has to download and that the JavaScript engine has to make sense of is exactly the code you want to use. So this leads to the benefits. There's less code. A, because there's less code to download because you're not downloading the entire framework. But also B, because you are not having to write a lot of boilerplate to work with that initial main package like your jQuery file or your React file, because it's all compiled together. So there's less translating JavaScript into your framework style of code. Rather, Svelte interprets your code and applies the framework to it. Because there's less code, it will load faster, and it means there are more inbuilt solutions. So most frameworks are trying to be as light as possible because you have to download them. But with Svelte, because you're only downloading what you use, they can provide you with more, and if you don't use it, it doesn't get downloaded. So they can provide more inbuilt solutions, things that work straight away with the framework, so you don't need as many plugins. Now there are plugins, so you can make as many plugins as you want. But by default, there's a much bigger range of inbuilt solutions because it is a compiler. So tree shaking is this technology we're talking about, where it will look through all your code, see what you're using, and import that, rather than bundling everything together and you have to use the entire framework. And because of this, it means you've got a larger, safer solution space as well. You can think a bit more nimbly. You're not as limited. Now obviously there are logical ends to this. If you use every piece of Svelte, you're going to download the whole thing, so you need to watch that still. But typically, according to Rich, the creator of Svelte, again, maybe pinch of salt here, but he says that the typical Svelte app will be 40% less code than React. And now that is the code that you write, not necessarily the compiled result, which is going to be smaller again. So that's a huge advantage. And then also, because it's compiled and because it can understand what you're writing, it can live lint for you. So it'll do your usual code linting, but it'll do it to the degree of finding CSS declarations that you're not using and taking them out, telling you if you're breaking some accessibility rules. Now only the basics there, but still it's a good thing to have. Telling you if some things that you're using are deprecated. It's looking out for you before you've even pressed save, and that you don't really get with any other framework that I've encountered, certainly in JavaScript land. So another reason to love it. So then maybe you're more sold on it now, but what's it for? What can it do? And it can do a little bit of everything. So it can make web apps. Obviously you put on a page, single page application, that kind of thing. You can do server-side rendering of these apps, so you can start getting routes and things going. It can do web components. Now, seeing this said, I haven't seen anyone really using it. It feels a little bit, I think that's just good marketing. Web components are kind of cool, but I haven't really seen a good use for them with it. But it's also got its frameworks around itself as well. These are bigger projects that use Svelte to do specific tasks. So for example, Sapper can be used as a static site generator or on node, like a full stack. So this could replace Express with all the benefits of Svelte along with it. You can use Svelte native to make smartphone apps, and then up and coming, which I'm very excited about, is SvelteGL to do 3D WebGL stuff along the lines of 3JS, if you're familiar with that. Rich Harris again has teased it, he's shown it working, and it's there to download and play with. But I'm gonna hold off a bit until it seems more ready. He's definitely saying that this isn't ready for prime time yet. So now it's demo time. We're gonna get into showing you a little bit of how all of this works. So I'm gonna start you off on the Svelte site. After this, if you're interested, definitely go to the tutorial. The tutorial is brilliant. It walks you through the basics. It asks you to actually write some Svelte. It'll tease you along, and in each example you can try and write the code in here yourself. It'll automatically generate down here, but you can also hit show me to see the correct answer. An hour or two on this and you will know Svelte. It's very simple and straightforward. Again, kind of the jQuery thing. It's there to be understood. They really have worked on trying to make it as simple as possible. It's really looks just like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, which we'll see very soon. Again, the API. This is more of your documentation. This isn't as good as the tutorial, actually. Often I'll find the API proper documentation description isn't great. I'll end up going back to the tutorial or into the examples. But again, there's so much between the three of these, you're going to find your way. But then the really cool thing is the REPL. So this is a Svelte environment. So you can write your code over here and you get your result over here. So we're gonna play with this a little bit. So we can see here, so this is a proper Svelte file. We've got a script tag up here and we've just got regular HTML here. I mean, there's Svelte variables in there, but if I just write hello here, if I can spell, it just comes over. Even if we inspect here, if you can see that, can I zoom in? Yep. It comes in as a just regular paragraph tag. So how you use it is you, just like in JavaScript, declare a variable name with let and const, and you've got hello name. The curly brackets prints out your variable name. So this looks very nice. Let's make it a little bit more complicated. So if we tried to do a little bit of maths, so say we did let num1 equal 2 and num2 equal 3. That's very confusing naming structure, but that's what I've gone for. Let's make it a little nicer. And we can do let answer equal num1 multiplied by num2. So again, this is just JavaScript. So it's going to take num1 multiplied by num2, and then if we print it out here, ans, we get 6. Correct answer. We're winning. So what else can we get it to do? Let's try and do something a little bit more dynamic. Let's try and make num1 and num2 inputs so that we can mess with them. So we do input value equals num1. That's looking good. Value equals num2. Okay, so this is where I started, and it seemed too good to be true. So if I change this to 3, it is too good to be true, because we don't want to automatically assume two-way binding on all our variables. That'll end up with a lot of handlers in the runtime. So automatically you don't get two-way binding, but all we need to do is put in, without a capital, bind to value and bind here, and we end up with, oh no, it's still not working. So what's interesting here is that is actually updating num1. If we put num1 here after, you'll see that num1 is actually updating, but our answer here isn't. And the reason again is we don't want to overload the browser. So we've said let answer equal num1 multiplied by num2. And when that script is run first, it does that calculation, and then it leaves answer alone. It doesn't want to overload your browser. But we can ask it to update when num1 or num2 changes. So all we have to do is use this invalidator syntax. So I was saying React and Angular, a lot of boilerplate and things you need to know about the framework. This is about as much as you just need to know about Svelte. That little $: you've just, in my mind, learned Svelte. Because now, if I change the 2 here to 7, answer is updating. So simple, so nice. This is a lot of the complication. So even if we want to make this a component, React, Angular, all components, let's have a look. We'll call this our calculator .svelte, and we'll just grab these, our little calculator, so we don't want all the script because world is related to our app. So we'll just bring the things related to the calculator. Cool. And then to bring our calculator in, all we need to do is import calculator from calculator.svelte. And even see these warnings at the bottom down here. it's telling you whether things are valid or not as you type. Like, it's just looking out for you is how I feel it works. So then we do calculator, and there's our calculator back. So again, if you want to do any styles, just like in regular HTML, you create a style tag. So we can go h1 color red, and there we go. So if I was to do a h2, we don't have a h2 on the page, and say so it's saying unused CSS selector because there isn't a h2 on the page. Or even if I was to leave the h1 value empty, sometimes it comes up and tells you that, certainly in VS Code when you've got the Svelte linter installed, it'll tell you you've got a declaration without any values in it. So this is all brilliant. So I'm going to show you one or two more little tricks. Here's a one I made earlier, a quick little app. So I've got a list of books, and I've got an each printing out that list of books, and I've got a limit of 5, so it shows 5 books to begin with. And then if you click the more button, I'm going to run more, which ups the limit by 5. So we go from 5 to 10 books, and so on. And then when we get down to the bottom, the more button goes away. So if I just do anything here to bring that back to the start, you'll see it's a little clunky how these things fly in. So imagine we wanted to put an animation on this. What we can do is import a slide animation from Svelte transition, and then all we need to do is say on these LIs, so this block of code here refers to these LIs, that when they come in we want to slide transition. So we say transition slide, and now they slide in. You might think, wow, that's kind of cool, but surely there's going to be lots and lots and lots and lots of code. So you can literally see the JavaScript output here. That whole app, sure, it's 308 lines, but there's a lot of just the basics of Svelte there. If we look at a more built out app I've got here where there's many components, so we've got this dynamic chart, this is a mortgage rate calculator. As we change numbers, we're updating SVG on the fly. If we look at the JS output here, it's not that many more lines. There's kind of a 200 to 300 line base level Svelte, and then as you add in the components, they're really tidy, like 308 lines. And notice that like some of these are just returns. You got this whole app. I challenge you to try and write something this complicated, that little code that you can make sense of so clearly. Now, we haven't gone through all of this, but to me it makes sense. Okay, so I don't want to go too far into all of this. That has been our little whirlwind introduction, and all that's left to say is, if I can get this going back, let me know if you have any questions. Hit SvelteDublin or Lo-Fi Codes, put a question in the comments of this video. If anybody wants to do any talks on this, you're more than welcome. Send me a direct message on either of those and I'll get back to you. And thanks very much for watching. I hope you try out some Svelte, and I will talk to you next time.